Hey, how's it going?
Going good.
I thought only cows could make me cuss, but obviously computers can too. I tell you what, I spent the last 20 minutes trying to update the computer so I could get on it with the computer so I wouldn't have to use my phone, but nope, not today.
I hear you. We've been having internet problems here, so hopefully it's all fixed and it'll hold out.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Well, there, it snowed here again today, so
Oh no.
I tell you what, it's hard to get in the mood for spring. Every time it snows, you just want to stop.
I bet. 70 something here today, but we got a storm rolling through here right now. Internet
Really?
in and out.
Well, I was watching Good Morning America this morning. I read the ticker at the bottom a lot of times just to see what else is happening. And I seen my hometown on there. It was on the ticker. So I called home and said, what's going on? I just seen the last, the town. I didn't see what it said about it. Oh, we had a tornado come through here last night. So
Oh no.
but it went north of them and south of my sister. So it kind of went in between. But my folks run a tree trimming service. So tornadoes business.
Yeah, tornadoes are a bad deal.
Yeah, somebody got hurt and they had to take them. It didn't kill them, but it took them they had to go to the hospital.
Well, I don't think it's even going to rain here, but there's just thundering and the wind blowing. But I think it's going to go by us and not hit. So.
Yeah, it's getting that time of year where it start causing fires and stuff up here when it does that.
It's too green here now for fire. Ben's drinking.
Texas soda right there. Our internet's down.
Our internet.
Yeah. David ain't moving. He's froze. He's frozen.
So we're just spring's coming along pretty well here. We got it's getting warmer. It's supposed to be 70 tomorrow, so that's pretty good.
That's really good.
I don't want to come too fast. I don't need it any faster than that. I need more time to get everything done before I got to do honeybee pollination in New Jersey.
I bet. That's
yeah.
Well, you don't have to worry about Montana. Spring comes late and winter comes early.
Yeah. We're thinking about, we might be going up. I don't know where. We were talking to a guy about leasing some bee yards up there this year. But we're still ironing out the details. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but I think it's in western Montana, but I really don't know. He's kind of fuzzy on. He doesn't give us all the details, but we'll see.
You only need to know
yet. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, exactly. Until we commit to it, we don't need to know exactly. Yeah. So.
Well, like I said, some of these guys up here, well, they tell you they want to do something, and they don't give you none of the details. So it's hard to do something if you don't know any of the details.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we got a lot going on as it is. We want to try it to kind of expand, what we're doing now, just more diversification, but it's just, it's more to do. So.
Absolutely. We do that all the time. Keep adding stuff on to you. So busy you can't get to it all.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit. At least amount. I haven't never done that, but we should. I mean, if we do, we plant and cover this year, so that would really help. It really diversifies the honey. Gives it more profile flavor, I guess, if you got like 9 different varieties in your mix.
Yeah, every flower makes a different type of honey, so they all kind of blend together. When you got a bunch of different flowers, you can get a blend, usually like a wildflower, but most of what's made over that way, you got canola, alfalfa, and clover for the most part.
Right. Most right by the alfalfa fields.
Yeah.
don't know if Larry and
Pretty
them
good
got
height.
kicked off because of the storm they was having or not.
Oh,
Yeah,
we're
I don't know.
back.
They were
I think we're back.
Oh, you are back? Okay.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't happen again. We'll see how it goes.
I was just like, I can't see nothing but my screen. I can't see anybody else's. Or it might be just winging it.
Well, we're ready to get started whenever you are, David.
Well, I was going to do one more thing, but I didn't get it. I got everything printed off, but I was going to get the varieties printed of all the different.
Okay.
So if you can just hold on just 1 minute, let me see if I can print that off, and then I can see if I can get this. Now, I may not can.
I have a question. The first meeting that you did, you mentioned that crabgrass was some of the best grass for grazing.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, do you overseed it with any other type of grass? Or I'm in the North Georgia mountains and we pretty much have grass all year round. And crabgrass definitely grows good. Would I need to overseed it with anything else or just go straight with crabgrass?
If you have something else growing there, it'll do within the, like what you already have. It'll
Well, we have nothing
almost
right
take
now.
over.
We're starting up. We have dirt. We're,
Well, you got an open canvas then, but crabgrass, the way I've done it in the past, and I did this in southern Arkansas when we grew it there, but it was we planted ryegrass in the spring, in the fall, and it would play out about the middle of May, and the 1st of June when it warmed up, we planted the crabgrass in there 1 year, and it's a perennial, so it keeps coming back that time every year.
okay.
So what it would do would be the middle of May, when it started getting hot, we would just drag the field, and it would come back. It would start coming back immediately.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and we planted it as a Red River crabgrass is the name of it. Is the variety that really works well. All right, I think I'm ready on that. So I was just trying to get that in case somebody asked me what I planted, I'd have a list of it. But
All right. Well, if you ever want me to, during the meeting, to screen share some of the stuff you sent, just let me know.
okay, I was going to start with some of those different types of grasses and stuff, but the first one I sent a picture of that most know what looked like was that mob grazing picture.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be just a second before I get to that, but
Okay. Just let me know when.
all right.
I'll put it on the screen for you.
And if somebody wants to ask a question during the middle of this, I don't want to just talk the whole time, and because you might be, bored with listening to me. Did everybody able to get the sheet that you sent for the like all the different terms and stuff, just so everybody knew what it was?
I sent it out as the notes for this week in the email.
Okay, so they can still do that, right? In case they.
Yeah, they should be able to pull it up unless they have trouble with the Google stuff.
Right. All right. Well, what I was going to talk about tonight, for the most part, was different types of grazing, and what it would be, conventional type grazing, just turning cows out on pastures, or rotational grazing, moving them from pasture to pastures, several different kinds of grazing techniques, but you also can, combine some of them as well. So the first thing with grazing, and I put it on one of the sheets, the most important thing to grazing cattle is shut the gates. And what that means is if you got cows and they can go in this little hay field and they can go in this little trap behind your house, and then they can go down the trees, and if they can do all that at the same time, they selectively graze only what they like. And then after they graze that all down, there's nothing there that they do like. So the most important thing to grazing cattle is to shut the gates and put them in there, make them graze what you want them to graze, when you want them to graze it, and then move them to the next pasture and let it rest. So one of the first jobs I ever had, they had, I think it was 200 acres with 100 head of cows on it. And they bought all the hay and did all that. And I said, you got plenty of grass in that environment. You ought to be able to grow hay and do all your own. And what I found out, they just cut a hole in the fence so they didn't have to worry about moving cows around. So they just let them go from pasture to pasture. So all I did was fix the fence, shut the gates. And all of a sudden we made enough hay on that 200 acres to feed all those 100 cows during the winter. So we cut down on our production costs just by basically shutting the gate. So that's one of the main tricks to it is make them graze what you want them to graze when you want them to graze it. One way of doing that is the cell grazing or strip grazing. And that's usually how people do it. Usually can do this with poly wire or some form of high tensile wire that you can, split your pastures up into smaller paddocks is what I call them, or you can call them whatever, smaller cells, and then graze them in a rotational fashion. So where you can graze one and then you might not come back to it for a month, especially in the South. Every month you can come back to it. Every 2 weeks you can come back to it. It'll grow. Graze it one time and you might not come to it till the next. It might not grow back. So it's a lot different in my environment than what I was used to. We get 15 inches of rain here on a good year. And when I was in Arkansas, we got 45 to 50 inches of rain annually. So big difference. But cell grazing, all it is basically is splitting your pasture into smaller paddocks and then moving usually on basis. When you go to intensive grazing, all you're doing is doing them even smaller and then moving multiple times a day. But most folks like myself are busy. You can only get there usually one time a day is stretching it. So you don't want to get them too small to where you got to move them every 30 minutes. That's too much work or too much labor intensive. So main thing is put your number of cows on a set amount of acres or set amount of space that they can consume everything that you want them to consume in one day and then move them. So one of the other things is, and most people have, before their job or after their job, that's when they rotate their cows. So first thing in the morning, they may go out there at 7 o'clock in the morning, go move the cows to the next paddock, and then they have to go to work. And then they don't come back and see them till maybe after work and see what they've ate. And then the next morning they do the same thing. But like I said, when I worked for the University of Arkansas as a beef research specialist for 14 years, and we did grazing research and trials of every kind of sort that you can imagine. And we found that if you move your cows in the middle of the day, like at noon or right around that time, you could get 0.2 of a pound more gain by moving them at noon than you could by moving them at 6 in the morning. And basically what that is, and a lot of people have heard the bricks version of grass, the bricks in the grass, the building blocks of the grass, that's controlled by the sunlight and heat. So overnight it gets cool, all the nutrients in the grass kind of go down to the roots or down to the lower parts of the plant. So it's not available what the cow's going to eat. But if you wait till noon, or especially when it gets warmer during the day, the sugars rise to the top of the grass. So when that calf takes a bite of grass, he's getting more nutrients in the grass at noon than he would be at 6 in the morning. And the cows are going to eat faster when they're hungry than when they, getting full. So even though you moved them on at 6 in the morning or 7, sun's just coming up, it's still kind of cool out. They're hungry because you just moved them. They'll eat most of what they're going to eat in the first hour. Then they might pick on it the rest of the day, but they've consumed all the grass without the sugars and the nutrients in it. So they're not getting the full benefit of it. So if you have the option to rotate your cows, rotate them during the heat of the day around noon, on the same grass, doing the same rotation, you can get 2/10 of a pound more a day just by moving them in the afternoon versus moving them in the morning. So I'd like to tell you, I found that out by on my hands and knees on an Easter break, clipping grass at different times of day so I can measure the nutrients of it. We'd take a grass sample at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, took one every hour all day to see what the rise and fall of the nutrients was. So a lot of things you do in research you wouldn't normally do, but you can use it in this practicality to, get some more gain. So another way is
A question on that.
stockpile grazing.
Could
Yep.
I ask a question about that grazing practice? So things are starting to get dry down here in Texas, and therefore I do believe that I'm going to need to be feeding hay. So with that being said, if I do feed hay, say, put my cattle in a small area, say a 6-acre trap, and feed them hay in the morning, early morning, and then let them out at noon because the grass has grown some, would that be better than letting them out first thing in the morning and start feeding?
Absolutely.
Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And another thing, if you have limited resources on your grass, so say it's getting dry and that you don't want them out there all the time. We did another trial kind of in conjunction with that one where we turned the cows out. We had one group that got turned out for 12 hours during the day. And we had another group that got turned out just for 2 hours. And you ever heard of the fistulated steers, the one that have the hole in the side where you can take the cork off and pull everything out what they've ate, and we do new studies with that. So we had 6 of these things, and we'd put them out on different grazing treatments, but you'd have to empty them out first. So you had to empty all the rumen out. We'd weigh it and then put some of it back in at different levels. And we found out that the cows would graze more in 2 hours if they was on that routine than they would over a 12-hour period, because they were hungrier. They would eat more. They was trying to fill up. They knew they was hungry, so they would eat all they could. And the ones on the 12-hour routine, we had to do a behavioral study on those guys too, what they were doing. So the first 30 minutes you turned them out, they might be grazing. The next 30 minutes, they might be over licking on a pole or something, or drinking water, or laying down, or doing whatever. And those cattle wouldn't eat as much as the ones that was only turned out for 2 hours. So you can get all the nutrient value you need, and that animal will fill up his rumen in 2 hours time. And then you don't have them laying on the grass or, trampling your grass, and it can make it last longer. So if you're in the area and you can put them on and take them off, it's a lot better just to give them at least 2 hours. That's what we found it took to get an adequate amount. And, if you have to leave them a little bit longer, but you can turn them out for 4 hours and then pull them off. And then that ground's got 18 hours it can recover, or 20 hours, I guess, or 24, if you only turn them out 4 hours. But that grass would save a little bit just not by not being trampled on or laid on, or, all that's going on it. So it's a lot of ways of using those cell grazing. And we use little, dry land traps like you're talking about. We would keep them in that trap where they had hay and water, and then we would turn them out just for that 2 hours time and then bring them back in. So you can really extend the grazing life of your pasture by only putting them out there. Because the rest of the time they just tearing something up, looking to get out, looking over the fence of somebody else.
And with that being said,
Do you have another question?
Yes. Do I need to,
Okay.
does it need to be done on a routine basis, or if I do it one day, am I able to skip a day or 2 days? In other words, leave them on the hay, because I don't know that I could do it on a daily basis, but I might be able to do it every second or third day, that type of feeding. Would it matter that way?
You can do it on long as you have a routine.
Okay.
It's good. We had what do they call it? They call it we called it creep grazing on the calves, but it's kind of the same thing. We did it because it was a government entity. We had to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We would turn cows on pastures on small grains or ryegrass fields, but they only got on it for, I think it was 6 or 7 hours a day is what they got on it, 3 days a week. The rest of the time they were just on dry land Bermuda grass with hay. So this was during the winter time. So we would turn them out, 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We'd put them on like at 8 o'clock because it was government thing. Nobody could come in early. We turn them in at 8 and they had to come off by 3:30. We had to have everybody gone by 3:30. The workers, the researchers could stay there 24/7, but the workers had to be gone. They couldn't work any overtime. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 to 3:30, that's the only time they grazed. And then over the weekend they didn't, and then they went back, and we had substantial amount of gain, and the pasture lasted longer. When we was grazing that, we had 24 cows on 18 acres total. So 12 of it was regular Bermuda grass, and 6 acres of it was either ryegrass or endophyte free fescue in the winter. And then they had the crabgrass that we was talking about earlier. We had that during the summer, and they did the same thing. They went on the summer, just 3 days a week, and they could graze that field. They gonna ruminate for a while, so that day that they're off, they're not really hurting. A cow's basically got a 3-day window. You can do something, do this one day, do something else the second day, do something else the third day, and then start over again. And as long as it's within that 3-day period, you can pretty much routinely, that's with the microbes in the stomach, they're used to digesting it. So when you turn them back on, it's not like going on it for the first time. Those bugs will live at least 3 days. So if you only graze ryegrass 3 days, every third day, they would still have the bugs in their rumen to digest it, and you could get proper new digestion from it. So yeah, as long as you do a set routine, you can't do it Monday this week and then Thursday, and then next time it's going to be Tuesday and maybe Sunday, 4 or 5 days between it. It's kind of hard, but if you can do it within a 3-day window, you can do it and still have benefits from it.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
It does indeed. I appreciate that.
Hey, no problem. One other way of is stockpile grazing, and most of this is done with grasses that have a season, like fescue. It grows pretty much year round, but it's certain times of year that it's not good to graze it. And a lot of people in the South, especially the Southeast, have fescue. And one way to get around some of the endophytes and stuff in the Kentucky 31, which is the grass that grows most prevalent all over the U.S., is stockpile grazing it. So what we would do was in September or the last of August, we would go in and clip the grass down as short as we could get it. And that gets some of the endophyte out of it. You get the seed heads and all that out of it, and it kind of goes dormant in that period of time. So we would cut it down close and then fertilize it the 1st of September when you normally get kind of a fall rain or something, and we'd grow it to maybe the 1st of December. And then when it got really cold, the grass would kind of stop growing, but it was already built up enough forage matter that you could go out there and strip graze it every day and get a lot of benefits of it. So the field we did, I think it was 40 acres, and we turned 40 heifers and 1 bull out on this to see what they would do. And we moved it, I think it was, I don't forget how much it was. It was like 30 feet every day, but it was a 1/4 mile long. So they had to graze that whole strip, and then we'd move it the next day. And the heifers gained 2 pounds a day while we was breeding them. And the bull that was covering all 40 of those heifers gained 1 pound a day and bred the cows. So we thought that was pretty good. And the nutritional level is really high. The only thing different about stockpile grazing, you usually strip it and then you don't bring a wire behind you, so they keep going across the grass, because it won't regrow during that dormant time of year. So you're not really hurting it. And it's easier to get one source of water and you just move one line every day. So that's a easy way. If you can grow fescue, if you have it, that's a good way to graze it and not get the bad qualities of the fescue with the endophyte. So that's one other way of grazing. Let's see what else. Another thing, one of the most important things other than shutting the gate would be management groups. And I travel a bunch and go to people's places, delivering bulls, cows, whatever. And they show me their herd. Everybody wants to show you their herd, but they got their cows with the bull year round, with the calves, and then grazing their yearlings at the same place, because they say, well, I don't have but one pasture and it's hard to keep a fence between them, and they get together, so they just run them all together. But the worst thing you can do to a steer is teach it to graze like a cow. A cow will graze a little bit and she'll lay down and chew her cud. And she's resting. And then she get up, maybe graze for an hour, and then she lays down and does something else. On those steers, you want those things to be taught how to graze and graze aggressively. That's the only way they're going to gain and produce like you want them to do. A cow's already built all her body mass, so all she's doing is maintenance, or lactation if she's, milking a calf. So she don't have a whole lot of needs. That steer, if you want him to gain 2 pounds a day, he's going to have to get after it. So what we try to do, we keep them in management groups. We put all the cow herd together, and maybe if you have enough pasture, you might keep your first calf heifers in a separate pen just so they get the proper nutrition. If you put cows and first calf heifers together, a lot of times those cows will kick the heifers to the back of the line, and they don't consume enough, and then they don't grow enough, and then they don't perform as well because they not had the proper nutrition. But especially the steers or your yearlings from weaning on need to be in a separate group where they can graze, and always give them something to do. So we're always moving them, which every time you move them, it stimulates them to graze. If you put them on fresh pasture, they're always going to, be at grazing. Even in Arkansas, which it gets pretty hot down there, we never had shade for those cattle either. And once we took the shades out of the pasture, we had some temporary shades or man-made shade shelters. They would all congregate under those shelters and they wouldn't go out and graze. And these were all straight black cattle. So they wanted to see what that would do. So we took all the shelters out and we got more gain, even though they were exposed to the sun and didn't have a way of, cooling down. They were able to graze and do better with no shade. And even with the cows and calves, we started doing it with those guys too, because more times than not, every time you lost a calf, it was under one of those shelters, either got stepped on or squashed or something like that. So even black cattle in the sun can do all right with no shade. And if you take away their things that they can do that's not gaining, it'll increase their gain. So if you have anything they do that's not grazing is not gaining weight. So we try to take out, the shelters, the loafing areas, anything like that. So when those cattle went on the grass, all they knew to do was to eat. And we try to do that with our steers too. I mean, we always give them something to do, and grazing is the best thing. That's the only thing that's going to make you money, is if they're grazing, they can convert it. It's always good to have something in the pasture that they like, because you can make them graze it. Let's say you got some, rank grass that's already matured out or whatever. If you leave them in there long enough, they will eat it because they're hungry. But my boss told me one time, you can't starve a profit into one. So making them eat something they really don't like, money, and they're not going to gain like they should. So you might have to, clip a pasture or something if you're in an area that you can do that, and you get more rain coming, that you can you can graze again, but clip that down so that it's starting to grow back and get the tender grass, because that's what's going to make the steers gain the most weight. So it's really important to do those types. So I went over those two. One of the things I wanted to look at, because a lot of people ask me all the time, they get their forage report and they don't, well, I guess I better go to the other one first. So Kim, if you have that mob grazing picture that you could post or show a picture and have somebody something to look at besides myself. They mob grazing is a way of grazing if you have large numbers. That's the way it's intended. You can mob graze something if you have really small paddocks and you have 10 or 12 cows and you can put them on, a quarter acre or something like that. It's still the same concept. Out in the West, they do it a lot with mob grazing on cows. I think she's posting. There we go. It's a pretty picture anyhow. Uh-oh. Are you still there, Kim? Okay. Something said it failed, but all right. So this picture, I think, is a guy that we have is coming to our field day for out of northern North Dakota. And I think that's 1,200 cows on about 5 acres. So a lot of us can't do 1,200 cows. It'd take me and a lot of my friends to come up with 1,200 cows. But this guy raises 1,200 cows and he moves them once a day, or he might move them more than once a day on this field. So what it's doing is kind of stimulating the ground, just like the buffalo did back in the, on the prairie when they was running, when they trample the ground. Those cattle eat the grass. Their foot action is trampling the ground, stirring it up a little on the top. And then they're also putting their manure and urine back on it. So he's fertilizing that field and getting the nutrients out of it and stimulating it to grow while doing this every day. And then you can see right behind it to the left where that's where he just come off of, and to the right is where he's going next. So even if you don't have 1,200 cows that you can do this with, if you had 5 cows and you want to put them on a quarter acre or something, you can, get the trampling action the same. Also, this is one way you can seed a pasture too. So if this is the time of year you want to plant another variety of grass, what you would do is just broadcast it on the new ground where they're going the next day. When you turn the cows on it, their foot action actually plant the seed for you. You'll get the manure and the urine on top of it to stimulate it to come up, and you can plant your field without breaking the soil up. So it's a way of non-tillage planting, or like a no-till. If you don't want to drill it with your tractor, you can just broadcast it, turn enough cows on it to do the foot action to trample that seed into the ground, and you'd plant your pasture on your own without having to crank the tractor up. So I thought that was a pretty cool picture, so I wanted to include that. But like I said, it's Jerry Dolan from Blackleg Ranch is where I got this picture from. But I've heard him talk several times. And I remember he said, I think it was 1,200 head of cows that he was actually doing that with. And all you have to do to move 1,200 cows, when they get used to it, you open the gate and call them, they're moving. You better get out of the way, because it's going to be a stampede, because they're trying to get there as fast as they can. So once the cattle get broke, it's the easiest thing in the world to do. And we would do the cows, we would turn them on the pasture when I was talking about 3 days a week, open the gate and they see the truck coming, they knew to go, and they'd run on the pasture. But every afternoon, we had to hurry up and get out of there, or the workers did. They would drive down the field coming back from whatever we was doing else on the farm. Somebody had to come back and turn those cows out. They would just drive down the road kind of fast, honking the horn, through the middle of the pasture, and all 6 pastures that we had on, in different places. But every one of those pastures, all the cows and all the calves would run off that field. All you had to do was go and shut the gate. But they knew they was fixing to have to come off of there. So they got in the routine, and you can make them do a lot of things that you didn't think you can make them do just by doing it every day. So, but the other thing I was going to talk about was the forage sample. And a lot of people, they always call me with their forage samples, like, here's my forage sample. What does it mean? So I thought it'd be good to kind of look at it, some of that, and then try to go over some of the terms and see what's really important on that, on your forage report. So Kim, if you have that one I sent with the Service Tech Laboratories, and we can put that up. And one of those things, like I said, most people, the first thing you hear about, they always want to brag on how much protein it's got. And protein is good. I don't want to say it's not. But protein is not your limiting factor of what is going to do for that. That right there is good. You might have to blow it up to look at it, or you can, she might can put it in the thing where you can go back and look at it later. But mostly it's going to tell you, the moisture in the hay, the dry matter. That's based on when you take all what part's moisture, what part's dry, actual fiber. And then you have the crude protein, which everybody knows about, and that's what they want to brag on most of all. But that's really not your most important factor. Anything over about 10% protein is going to go out the rear end of that cow or steer or whatever. If it's growing 12 to 14, but you hear people say, well, my Bermuda grass was, 22% protein. Okay, that's good to brag on at the coffee shop, but it's not really going to do you a whole lot of good. A couple of these other lines on there is what we look at and what most people look at. One of the most important ones is the TDN, which is total digestible nutrients. That's what's actually in there that the cow can use and break down and turn into red meat. So this first one is 57.9 as fed. That just means the other one, you just take the moisture out of it, which it always goes higher. So on a dry matter basis, it's 65, which is really good. Anything over 50 to 55 is a pretty good forage. You want to get it around 60. So the higher you can get it, the more digestible nutrients, the better they're going to grow on that ration. And then there's 3 lines right under that kind of breaks it down. It's net energy for maintenance, net energy for gain. Well, it's supposed to be lactation next, and then net energy for gain. So what that means is, let's say it's based on a cow in the field, and she's got a calf on her side. So the first bite of grass she takes is trying to keep herself alive. That's what that nutrient is going for. The second bite she takes, once she provides for her maintenance to keep her alive, then she's going to convert the other energy to milk for the calf. So that's her second priority. So the third one is for actual gain. So if you have enough energy in that grass for, just part of her requirements, she will maintain her body weight. She will milk her calf, but she'll either maintain her weight or lose weight on that ration. So that right there tells you net energy for maintenance. This particular one, the first one has 60. The second one has 62, which is a second cut, which is a little higher protein. Then the net energy for lactation is 60, which most of those will stay the same because there's plenty of nutrients in there. And then the last one would be net energy for gain. And that's the one that's always limited. So that means she can maintain her body weight, milk a calf, but she's not hardly going to grow that much on that first ration. And if you look at the third one's even less. So that ration just tells you what she's actually going to be able to do. You can maintain the cow, but she's not going to gain any weight. So The other one is your nutrients, your micronutrients down there, which is important to balance them and make sure one's not out of whack. But you can see your calcium and phosphorus is usually a 2-to-1 calcium to phosphorus ratio. Sometimes it gets a little more than that. You don't want to get, if you get up to a 3-to-1, then you're going to start having trouble with like milk fever, grass tetany, that kind of deal. But you can see what the nutrient level in this grass was. This was a first cut hay, second cut hay, and some solids that we put up, haylage. And you can see the first one, I'm not sure the 6.2 on the protein was accurate, but you can't argue with it. I was figured it'd be around 10. And then the second one was 14.8. And then the haylage, which is 9.8, which I thought was a little bit low. But this silage, this shows that we didn't put up as good a silage as we thought we did that year. So it's hard to argue with the numbers. They do a calculation, they do the analysis, and this particular laboratory runs it better than just looking it up in a book, which some of your labs will just write, if you put down, they want to know what type grass it is that you're grazing, and then they just look up in a book and tell you what it's supposed to be, and that's what they put on their paper. So you need to make sure you're sending your hay samples to a lab that actually runs them and not, does calculations. Anybody have any questions on that or see anything on there they don't understand? Or I could go over ADF and NDF, but that's kind of complicated. None? Or everybody asleep already?
So David.
Yes.
So I noticed something that, and now I'm not an expert at reading these things, but it seems to me that over here on your haylage, that the TDN and the the net energy went up significantly after it got dried down. Is that after it started to ferment, or is that
all that's
after they started to process it at
those
the lab?
first two numbers at the very top where it says the moisture? You see it's 35% moisture. So it's it out a little bit. If you take 35% of the water out, it leaves quite a bit of nutrients for that cow. It's still in there.
Yeah.
And that's what it's based on, is dry matter versus the moisture content. So the haylage is put up at a higher moisture. It should even be a little bit higher than that. It should be around 50. And I think that's why the quality wasn't as good. It dried down a little bit more than it should have before we could get it baled. And up here, you can dry it out. We cut the haylage, like we started cutting it 10 to 12 o'clock during the day for that same reason I was talking about the grass for turning cows out. We try not to cut it until the bricks in the grass are up in the what you're actually going to cut. So we let the sun come out and get it so the nutrients get to the top, and then we cut it. We might start cutting at noon to 5 and cut all we can cut that day. Turn around, and by 10 o'clock the next morning, it's starting to get too dry already. Because our humidity time is 5 to 10%. So it can suck the moisture out of that grass, and that particular sample got a little bit too dry. So if you put up haylage, you want it 50 to 60% moisture to help it to ferment. When you put up silage, it's usually 65 to 75% moisture. That's a little bit the difference. And then normally on your hay, you want it less or right at 13% moisture so it doesn't mold. So you can see the moisture content on the hay sample was 11%, but it's already dried out a little bit more since we put it up in the bale. Those bales will continue to dry even though you put them up. So that was down to 11%, which, like I said, if you get it too dry, you're wasting some of your nutrients, not capturing it. So it's good for timing. And you can see the second one was 12.9, so that was almost perfect. So that's about where you would want it on the second cut, 12.9 to 13. And then you can see it's got some really good nutrients in that hay. So, but any other questions on that? And you can look at it, and like I said, later on, you have a question or something, you can sure ask a question, and I see if I can't answer it, I get somebody that can. Because these things are confusing, for sure. But did that. I printed it out, but it was all really big writing. But in conjunction with the hay sample, you can see what those cattle will gain on it. And one of the things that you want to be able to check with that is your body condition score of your cows. And if you look it up, you type in body condition scores on your Google search, it'll come up and give you the pictures and things like that, what a cow looks like, what a 1 looks like, and what a 9 looks like. Basically, a body condition score is a score of fat cover over their back, over their rib, and it goes from 1 to 9. 1 being an anorexic, borderline starving to death, and 9 is obese. So ideally, you want to run around 5 to 6. Some people run 4 to 6, but 4 is getting where they're starting to pull nutrients out of their body and not using, their external fat that they're putting on. But that body condition score and your hay sample is how you balance your rations. If you have some that's a body condition score 4 and you want them to gain some, you got to look at that net energy for gain to make sure those cattle are going to be able to feed them enough to where they can gain to get from a 4 to a 5 or 5 to a 6. If you get over a 6, you start getting fat, and then you're wasting nutrients. So you start wasting nutrients, the cows get too fat. There's a picture. Look how Kim's on it right there. See? And if you can blow that up, you can look at it. They'll probably tell you that. Yep. So 1, you can see the anorexic, about to starve to death. 4, most people look at it and say, well, shoot, my cows kind of look like a 4. And that's all right. But like I said, they could get a little bit small and not, they might not breed back as fast. But if you look at the 5 and the 6, they're almost exactly the body condition score you'd want one going out when you go to the bull, getting ready to breed. 7, I mean, that cow's getting fat. 8 does gobby fat, and you start getting pawns right up on their tail head. And whenever they're putting that fat on, that fat's also going around their ovaries. So if you turn a cow out at a body condition score 8 and she's that fat, 8 or a 9, chances are she's going to be a slow breeder or a hard breeder is what they call it, because that cow's got fat deposits around her ovaries and not allowing proper fertilization and implantation when she would get bred. So 8 and 9 is not good. 1, 2, and 3 is not good. So if you can stay 4, 5, 6, a lot of my cows are 6 to 7s. The Aberdeen kind of adds a little more fat to them, and they stay in better condition. You can't hardly keep them thin. So, but that's a really good indication of what your cow's going to need. A body condition score of 1 is going to need more forage and a higher quality to get to a 3 to where she can actually breed than a 6 would. A 6 is almost coasting. You can turn her out on marginal grass and she's still going to gain just a little and she's going to breed just right. I mean, you won't have any trouble. And a lot of times that's all this is just matching your grass to matching your cows to get the right forage for the right body condition. And if these were all steers, you would want to kill them or process them when they was getting close to a 7, between a 6 and a 7. And that would help you, with your external body fat. It would help with the internal marbling a little bit. You start getting an 8 and a 9, you have to hang a carcass, but they might have a 4/10, 5/10 of an inch back fat, which they're going to trim down to a 1/4 of an inch. So you're actually, they're going to cut some off and throw it away. That's not going to be used for profit. So 8 and 9 is not good pretty much for anything. And 1 and 2 in my book, you shouldn't have cows if you're going to have them looking like a 1 and a 2. you might buy one and think you can breed it up and sell it as a, when it gets to a 6 and improve your, your bottom line because you bought a marginal cow and made it into a top quality animal. But that's one of those things that you can use to your advantage if you have that score in your head. On the research farm, we had to weigh every cow every 28 days because it was a research trial, and every bull, every cow, every calf got weighed every 28 days. And we'd have to give it a condition score. So we had to be able to visually look at them and tell, but then we'd also, when they go through the chute, we'd actually do a hand over their forerib. And you could tell how much fat deposit was put in, what she was putting on, if you could just put your hand right over that rib and see how far that back fat was going down. So that's a good indication. You can get it now where you can train your eye. You can say, well, I can look at my cow and say, all right, she's a 4, that one's a 5. You're always going to have one that's a 7 or 8 because one lost a calf or, had something happen. If she didn't have to work that year, she got fat. I kind of feel like I'm a 7 or 8 myself right now, but I've been trying to work, but it's still getting my body condition scores up a little higher than it should be. But that's one way you can check and see how much, if you need to add more nutrition to your ration or give them more grass per day to eat, but you want them in that 5 and 6 range if you can keep them there. So with that, when you figure that out, then you can pretty much, if you have a scale and you can weigh your cattle, it's good to know what some of the terms you always hear, the average daily gain on your grass. And a lot of times we'll run them back through the chute. If we have to treat them for flies or treat them for something, we'll run the cows back and just the scales in the chute. So when we run them through, we can get a weight on them real quick and see how much they're gaining out on that pasture. So average daily gain is something we do all the time here. It's a gain over a set period of time. So like I had an example on the sheet, just like if it was 82 pounds and they gained 82 pounds on 30 days, that's 82 over 30, which is 2.73 pounds of gain a day. And that's not unheard of. And a lot of times you can get up to 4 pounds a day on grass. The right time of year, forage. If they're on grain, you can even get, upwards of 5 pounds a day. And when those cattle are gaining that way, that's stress on the cows. A lot of people don't realize that a cow gaining over 2 pounds a day is actually stressing that animal because it's not really designed to do that. So when they start gaining those high gains, you can start having, health issues come up too. And she's got the bull test thing up, and what it is on that, that's last year's bull test that we did. And that's because I had all those numbers on it and I was going to use them, but you can see on there, that's what those animals, the birth weight, the weaning weight, that INT is the initial weight when we started the test or when we put them on feed. And these things were only fed 2 pounds of a pellet per day. Everything else with either that first cut alfalfa, which is, mostly grass. And then the haylage, we did it every other day. We would put out either second cut or silage. So that's kind of on that 3-day rotation I was telling you about. They could get free choice hay, which was the first cut. And then every other day we would feed them either silage or second cut hay and rotate it back and forth. Some days we would feed them the baleage and it'd take them 2 days to eat it. So it'd be like every third day they'd get the second cut. But then you can see also the ST is the start weight. So we had them on, used to that ration for about 15 days, 20 days before we started them. So it's kind of like running a race at top end speed. You don't start them from a dead stop because they will do a lot of compensatory gain if they was hungry or not fed just enough. You can see between the weaning weight and the initial weight, some of them gained, and it's got the average down below. So they went from 539 average, that first group, to 600. So basically 60 pounds in about 20 days. I don't have the dates on there. I thought the dates were on there, but anyhow, the start weight, and then you see it for 30 days, that's how much they gained. So they went from 634 to 706. So it was, you know, just under, I guess it's just over 60 pounds, which is 2 pounds a day. And you can see that we weighed them every 30 days across this deal to the end, and you can see what their average daily gain was. So this pellet was designed to feed bulls and make them gain 2 pounds a day on Angus. That's what they did on Jurgens Angus up here in Montana, is where they did the test pilot. So the top line of, you know, the first 5 or 6 bulls there are moderator bulls, which they gained 2.48, you know, 2.4 pounds per day over that 120-day period of time. The Aberdeen bulls, the full-blood Aberdeens, only gained 1.86. But we figured, you know, they're smaller, you know, different stuff, but we was trying to get that number closer to 2. And I think we got it closer to 2 this year. So the other thing it says, you see there, weight per day of age. And that's what that number is. It's the amount of gain they've gained over a long period of time. So that weight per day of age is taken at a year old on these bulls here. This was their yearly, the end of the test correlated with their yearling weights. So the weight per day of age, you can see the average for the moderators was 2.19. The average on the moderators was 1.66. But when you figure that up, all it is the weight they are today minus their birth weight, and then over the amount of time, which is for this case was 365 days. So that those moderator bulls gained 2.1 pounds a day every day they were alive between birth and a year old, which I think is pretty good. You can get some bulls that, you know, you can get them up to 3 pounds a day, but you got to pump the feed to them to do it. So I was just trying to go over some of these terms. So if somebody mentions that to you or says something about it, you know what it is. And then you can see that next line is SC is scrotal circumference. So we tested all those bulls at a year old to see what their scrotal circumference was at a year old. And I think they're supposed to be over 30 to be, you know, pass a semen test. You can see the 3 bulls that was in red, their scrotal circumference was too small.
Yeah, I think we lost David. Hopefully he'll be back here in just a second.
I got back, I think. Are you
No,
there?
we hear you. Yeah, we got you.
Oh, I thought somebody said, all right, he's talked long enough. But so that scrotal circumference is really important at a year old. Just to know, and that some people try to make excuses for cattle. A lot of people on here know Kip Farrow. And I've known Kip for a long time, but I read his, I'm on his mailing list, so I get his daily comments. And that's what I usually go. I don't usually read a lot of the other stuff, but I go with that one. But it said to love your wife, and what was the other one? And make excuses for your kids, but don't do either one with cows. So don't try to make excuses for cows and say, well, you know, it might have had her mother wasn't too good or this or that. When something doesn't pass a test, get rid of it. And that's what we did with those bulls. They had every opportunity to grow and do just like anybody else, and their scrotal circumference wasn't adequate, so we cut them. In fact, we cut them the next day after this was, we made them through the test so that we had the results, because all of them are not going to pass a test. I mean, you do a test for a reason, see which ones are the best and see which ones are the worst, And the ones that are worse, you get rid of,
Either
and then it makes your good bulls look better.
average daily gain.
So
Low compared to
you
the
can see their average daily gain
group.
wasn't that great. But even if they did gain, if they gained 3 pounds a day and they had small testicles, they still wasn't going to be a bull at our place. So you need to cut them. So, and then you see one bull down there was 39.5 scrotal circumference. So the larger the testicle, the more fertile that bull is, and more animals, more heifers he can breed. So you get one with 30, I mean, that's the minimum. He passed, but I always say that, what do you call the person that graduates last in vet school? Doctor. They don't tell you what his ranking was when you call him out in the middle of the night. He might have been last in his class. You want the ones always in the first of the class, especially if they're going to operate on you. So if the animal doesn't pass the test, just get rid of it. Don't make excuses for it. You know, if you cull the bottom off of your bull pen, the top part of your bulls look a whole lot better. So that's one thing we try to do. And I did a video of that, and we make it posted. It's it ain't that long. It's probably 10 minutes, where we had one of those yearling bulls that didn't pass the test, and we went ahead and cut him, but we videoed it just to have how you could cut a yearling bull standing in a chute and not, bleed and do all that. So we did that just for, so other people could see that you could do it. You can band them, and that's all right, but we try not to do that. I don't like things sitting around waiting and rotting off. I'd rather just get it gone and know it's gone. So anybody have any question about what's on that sheet? Or like I said, it's kind of got abbreviations, but after doing these abbreviations, it's almost as bad as the government making it, birth weights, BW, weaning weights, you abbreviate everything to where if you don't know what those letters mean, all of a sudden you don't know where you're at. So I didn't give you one of the ultrasound data. We ultrasounded these things the same day. So we had their scrotal circumference, semen tested them, weighed them off, and ultrasound them all in the same, over a 2-day period. We couldn't do it all at the same time to get all that information at a year old, which is basically where most of the industry says whether that bull's going to grow or not, is based off a yearling weight. You can base it off a 2-year-old weight, but it doesn't really tell you a whole bunch because that's too much environmental effects between, a year and 2 years. It could have been a dry year. It could have had 2 dry years by the time he, 2 years old. So it's kind of we do everything at a year old, even though we might not use them or use them heavily as a yearling, we still want all that information so we can rank them against bulls of the past or bulls that's coming up in the future.
Say, David.
Yes, sir.
This is the start of making a bull. This is the start of learning about what that bull is going to be like. You really know about 5 or 6 years later what he was really like.
Exactly.
How he really did. That's why when you're when you're going to be buying bulls, you want to buy one that if you're buying a young bull, you want to buy one that has this data on it, all this stuff done where you can make the best decision that you can make, because you're really not gonna know how that bull performed for 4, 5, 6 more years.
Yeah, right about.
And a lot of times you've already used that animal, you've already bred cows to him, and you figure out he's not that good. Well, now you got a whole calf crop that's not so good.
Well, that's right. If you buy a bull that you don't have all this data on, you have no way of knowing what's going to happen. But this makes it somewhat predictable. And then, but in a few years, you're going to really know how that bull did. But if you buy one without any data at all, it's just like shooting in the dark. You don't know which way you don't know what's out there. And when you're
right, and that bull I was talking about earlier that had the 39.5 scrotal circumference,
yeah,
that bull actually was the top gaining bull on the whole test. He had the best ultrasound. He had some of the best gain. I don't know if he was actually the top gaining bull. He was close, 1.88. which he was the top. He was the top gaining bull of the full bloods. So bulls that gain the best, grow the best, do the best, and he looked the best. So, I mean, you can get some of those other bulls. We even called more than just those three because they just didn't look right. All right, they passed the test, they did this, but some of them, you know, that's just not what you want to look at. So the best way to do it is just to get them out of your herd. Because if he breeds a cow, then chances are that the calves out of that bull is going to look just like that bull.
Well,
It's highly heritable. So if you got a bull that's not so good, his calves are not going to be so good either.
when you use bulls like this that are already have a lot of predictability, you don't make all these mistakes with calf crops that weren't what you wanted them to be, and you got to start all over again. I mean, I know Dave has been down that road. I've been down that road. You think this bull's going to be great, and you use him, and he didn't do what you wanted him to do. Well, then we got into years ago testing our bulls like Dave has got right here, where we get a lot more predictability. Your cow herd starts getting a lot more predictable. You know what it's going to do. You just keep doing it and keep doing it. You finally get to a place where I can tell. I mean, I feel comfortable telling people around here, and I do it all the time when they're here to buy cattle. I can tell you what that cow's going to be or that bull's going to be 5 years from now and how good it's going to do. So probably 85, 90% predictability. And you just can't do that if you don't start with animals like this that's been tested to start with.
Yeah, and it takes about 3 years before you know what you've done. Chances are, you know, you bred your cows, you have some start to get born, the calves look okay. Then you use him again because you're going to breed that cow back after about 60 to 90 days. And then all of a sudden, you're going to have 2 calf crops that are not good because let's say those calves wean off under what you predicted. Guess what? You got a whole nother calf crop coming next year. It's going to look just like those. So if you can get predictability, and like I said, with the ultrasound, we do that too, because we're going to eventually kill those steers and, you know, put them through our grass-fed beef program. And like I said, I didn't send you one of those pictures of the ultrasound of the ones that did it. Let's see, I might can do it, send it, but it's going to take too long to do that. I'm not that good at doing like Kim can just pull it up. But if you can get that predictability on your ultrasound, as far as your IMF and your shape score, that's the 2 things we really look at, and the ribeye size, because that's really predictable. And when that animal goes and breeds the other, you know, all your cows, that's what's going to influence that calf crop. So they check the ultrasound between the 12th and 13th rib on that steer. And that's just so happened to be right the same spot where they would kill that. When they kill that calf and they split the carcass between the top and the bottom half, they split it at the 12th and 13th rib. And that's where they would measure that reading on a steer when they grade it at hanging up in the processor. They grade it the same place where the ultrasound takes it. And a lot of people use blood tests to do this, and I'm not going to badmouth that. Sometimes it works. You can also, you know, DNA test them to where it tells you this one's going to marble better than that one. But to me, the actual is better because that's actually what that calf did in your environment. When you blood test them, it might say, you know, he's the highest marbling bull ever. But you may have to feed him a whole bunch to get him to that point. So in your environment, when we do them, let's say he's, you know, on the IMF, the scores that they give, if you ever read it, if it gives you the actual score, 4.0 is choice. So a lot of these bulls are grade choice at a year old. Well, you're not going to kill them till they're 18 months old. So if they can grade choice at 12 months, that's a pretty good indication they're going to be able to grade choice on grass by 18 months. And some cattle, and they found this out too from ultrasounded and from growing cattle out. If you put good cattle on grass, they will marble. If you put the same group of cattle on feed, they will marble. But if they don't have DNA in their system to marble, it doesn't matter how much feed you give them, they're not going to marble as good as some of these other ones. So that IMF tells you whether they're going to marble or not. And that's what we did on a group of steers. The first group of steers I did for grass-fed beef, we had 30 half brothers, all out of the same bull, out of basically half sisters. And we split them into two groups. One got feed, one got grass. And we measured their, their gains. We measured everything. And when those cattle went to the processor, they almost matched exactly what each group was. Even though you fed them, they was just a little bit higher on marbling than the ones on grass. But the ones that were higher, we did an ultrasound beforehand. So the ones that were the highest before were the highest on feed, and the ones that was highest on the grass, at the end of it, they were the highest. So doesn't matter what you feed them. If they're genetically programmed to marble, they'll marble on grass, they'll marble on feed. It's not going to matter. So, and it's really highly heritable. It's like a 40% heritability, which in the DNA world, 40% heritable is a really high rate of heritability. So that's really good on that part, to where you can, if you find a bull that marbles good, chances are his calves are going to marble the same exact way. And I got bulls, we use Standing Bear quite a bit, and most people have heard of him. So Standing Bear was a high marbling bull. We had 2 or 3 sons out of him that we kept and used, making money, Bear Down. There's 2 or 3 other ones. And No Surprise is another one. All those bulls marble almost identical to what Standing Bear did. So now we've got grandsons out of Standing Bear, because out of those bulls that I just mentioned, and they're almost identical to their sire and their grandsire. And now we've even got a great grandsire bull out of that same line. Even though you breed it into a different cow, those animals are grading exactly like their sire, grandsire, and great grandsire. So that is a highly heritable trait. If you have one that doesn't marble, his grandsire and his sire probably didn't marble either. So if you can get animals, like Larry was saying, if you get them, it's a tool to be predictable. It won't always work out, but 90% of the time it's going to work out to what their genetics or what they did on that piece of paper at a year old is going to tell you a lot of information how that animal is going to act, 2 and 3 years from now, or a cow in your herd, for 10 years. And if she's fertile, she will breed first in the first year. She'll breed first almost every year after that. And a cow that does late is going to grade, if she bred late in the year, chances are every year after that, she's going to breed late too. So all those things are highly heritable. So if you can pick those things, I got to charge my phone. It's about to go out. But if you can try to predict some of that, it will help you a whole bunch into making sure your herd acts just like the sires and the animals that you're using. Those genetics are carried through, and then you have a whole herd that looks just like your best calf. So
another thing that always amazed me, David, is like here we have cow families that are over 20 years old. The cow's gone, she dead a long time ago, but we kept offspring and keep going and keep going. Those ones that worked 20 years ago still working today. And
absolutely.
And everybody's environment's a little different, but when you start with something good and it worked, you can keep going and keep going and keep going with it. You don't have to go buy another bull every time that you think something's wrong. Just keep going through your herd and going through your herd over and over and over, and testing and watching. And there's nothing wrong with buying a bull somewhere, as long as you can get the data on it to add to your herd that will help you improve something that you need to improve.
And once it works in your environment, because like you said, there's a lot of different environments. You know, everybody here is in a different environment. And an animal, it may not work as good in my environment as it does in yours. But if it's the top producing one in your environment, chances are it's going to be the top producing one in my environment too. It may not be as good, but it's better than this contemporary group. So that's a way to test them. I mean, all those bulls were in the same pen, eating the same day. It snowed on every bull at the same time. If it was cold on one bull, it was cold on all of them. So then you can't make excuses for him and say, well, you know, maybe he maybe got pushed out of the trough. If he's an aggressive eater, his steers are not going to be aggressive grazers, and they're never going to gain good. So you want one that's a pig, basically, that wants to get in there and eat all it can. Those are the ones that's going to make you money. They got to be aggressive. And when they're aggressive at the feed trough, they'll be aggressive in the pasture. They'll eat more grass, they'll gain more weight, and they'll make you more money. Same way. So I don't like timid ones. If they don't want to, you know, some of them don't come up because we're feeding them or, you know, standing there and they don't want to come up. Well, they, you know, they kind of stay in the back of the field and kind of look at you and then they don't eat. That's a nervous animal. That animal's not going to eat good. And chances are it's not going to breed right because it's always looking to see if somebody's in the pasture with it. And you don't want those kind. So it's better just to, you know, weed those out of your program, because one is gentle and comes up to you, they're not going to mind eating in any condition. If it's out there, they're going to eat it. So.
Well, that's another thing too, Leeds. I was just thinking about this is, you know, spend time with your cow herd too, see what their mannerisms are, whether or not they're sticking with their calf, feeding them all the time, you know, whether or not their calf is grazing with them, like, you know, watch those cows, because your better mamas are going to raise better calves. And when they have their first calf, they're going to know how to raise their first calf too. So make sure
That's
you
exactly
watch those
right.
mannerisms. And even with your bulls, we've noticed over time too that even though a bull is not raised by his sire, raised by his dam, he's still going to have some of the same mannerisms that his sire did. So we had a bull out here once that was super lazy. Well, we kept one of his sons and he was super lazy, so we just got rid of him. So I mean, you don't want bulls that are aggressive towards you, but you definitely want them to get out there and they're working the cows all the time, sniffing them, going from cow to cow, making sure that they're doing their job. And you know, it's the same thing with, you know, with your cows. Are they taking care of their calf? You know, are they maintaining their body weight? Are they doing the things they need to do in the pasture to take care of themselves and make money? And those mannerisms, well, they'll pass on too. So you want to make sure you spend time with your cow herd and get to know your cows so that you pick up on those things too. They're important as well.
That's really important. And like I said, we had to do behavioral studies on cows all the time, see if they was grazing or what they were doing during that period of time. And you can learn a lot about them that way, even the cow herd. And that right there will make you more money. You find a cow that's lazy, don't come take care of her calf, it always looks like its hair is matted or something. She's not taking care of it like she should. And I got one this year, and I guarantee you she's going to be gone. She's always says she loves it. She bellers at it and everything else, but she don't let it nurse like she should. And he's always got matted face. His hair's not taken care of. He's just not doing. He's a poor doer. And she's a body condition score 8. So that's not making you any money.
Now,
if a cow's fat and sassy, she is not working.
Now we have a cow too that we bought her a few years ago. She just her first calf, you know, she lost, which, you know, with heifers, if they're new to our environment, with our rate of predation, we can kind of excuse that the first year. The second year, she raised one, it did okay. This year, she lost another one. So we're like, it lost it to predation. And that's it. We're done with her. And so we're going to be keeping a close eye on the heifer that we did keep, because you know, like I said, those mannerisms pass on. So if she doesn't have her first calf, she's going to the sale barn. Like if she's gonna have it, she's pregnant. But if she doesn't, you know, if she doesn't protect it like she needs to for our environment, then she's gone. So, I mean, those sorts of things, depending on your environment, they really do matter. They can cost you money if they don't, you know, if their mannerisms don't perform for your environment as well.
And they did a study on that, economic study, and they told us about it, or was showing us, if a cow loses one calf in her lifetime, let's say she loses her first calf, it takes her 10 years to make up for that loss. So she'd have to have a calf every year after that to just break even. So it's really important to think of that and not make excuses. Well, you know, it was raining out or it was cold. I got cows that have calves in a foot of snow and they're fine. And I got cows that can have a calf in on a dry day and still don't take care of it. So, and we bought a bunch of extra cows this year. We'd sold some down. We bought a bunch more for receps. And boy, I tell you what, not knowing where I'm from, I'm almost disgusted with some cattle people that they would raise cattle this way. Some of them are crazy. We got them, they're all bred to low birth weight bulls. And I've had probably 5 over 90 pounds out of first calf heifers, weighing about 800 pounds. So I used to pull calves all the time. In the last 10 or 12 years, I probably pulled maybe one a year that's turned wrong or something. All of a sudden today, I'm very well qualified on how to pull a calf, because I've had to pull about 20 out of that 100 cows that we bought. And then, like you said, not taking care of them. The bag, some of them have good bags, some of them have terrible bags. I was like, oh my gosh. So it matters who you buy your cows from. And when you can buy one and, you know, you get some history, some, you know, somebody you can actually call and say, hey, something ain't right. Guess what? I bought these through a bred cow sale, but there's nobody I can go back. I had 4 premature abortions that were probably 30 to 35 pounds, and they just spit the calf out and dead. I mean, it's hard to make up for that. So that come from somewhere in her life, poor nutrition, poor something didn't form right. And then she kicked that calf out because it wasn't going to live, or it died in utero, and she just expelled it. But, you know, 4 cows out of 100, all of a sudden, you know, that's 4% death loss right there. You know, that's a hard way to make money on them. I think somebody had a question, but I can't see it.
What's the best way to find out your sources to get ultrasound data? Having somebody to do the testing for you, how do you find those sources?
They have a listing of them. You can look up ultrasound technicians in your area. What area are you in?
Northwest.
Oh, in the Northwest. There's a couple in Oregon. I know there's one in Washington. A lot of times we don't use cup ultrasound, and this is a big fight over things. I don't want to get in a fight with nobody, but when cup does it, the technician comes, he takes the ultrasound. You don't see anything that day. So if you wanted to sort them out of the chute, you can't do it. And then also it goes to somebody back in the lab in Iowa. They analyze it. 2 weeks later, you get your results. And then you got to go back and work them again to sort them. The ultrasound that we use, it's the same exact technology, but it's a different computer program. And it's called chute side. And what it does, when they scan it, they take a scan within 10 seconds. You know exactly what that animal is right then. So it's really good in like feedlot situations, or in if you're trying to sort cattle, which ones are ready to go to market, which ones are not. I mean, this would be on a pretty big scale, but you can sort them out of the chute. All right, these are, you know, choice already. They're ready to go to market. Sometimes you can look at them and tell, but sometimes you can't. And it tells you all those figures right there while the cow's still standing in the chute. So we do it sometimes. We can grade them and cull them, especially the bulls, based on that right there. And when it takes that picture, we know, okay, this bull is a 4.2. He's going to be a good marbling bull. He's going to do good. The next bull comes through in the same situation. He's a 2.5. I mean, what's the problem there? They had all the environmental conditions are exactly the same. That bull just not one that's going to marble. And he may look good and he might do this, but when you sell the cows, especially if you sell them on the grid or something like that through a feedlot, or you want to sell to somebody, we sell on that basis. This bull graded this way at a year old. This is his ultrasound data, which means his calves are going to grow that way. And you can sell bulls based on that ultrasound data, but you know it right there the day you working them, not 2 weeks later and got to go back and sort them again. So I think Monday, this coming Monday, my ultrasound technician is getting here. We had a miscommunication, but he's supposed to be in here this past Monday, but he's coming this Monday. So we're ultrasounding them on Monday. The vet's coming on Tuesday to semen check them, and then we're going to clip them and video them on the next day. So, but we try to do the ultrasound first because that's your volatile one. Stress will influence that. So if you run the bull through the chute and had him semen tested, with the electroejaculator, and he's stressed and he's this and that, and he goes off feed, that's going to make his ultrasound look bad. So we try to do the ultrasound first. So we had to back everything up till that technician could come. So we'll ultrasound them on Monday, and then we'll have this year's data completed for the bull test that was, just completed in April. Any other questions?
So yeah, we have a question from Bob. Said, do you or have you grazed with other animals, goats, sheep? And do you find advantages such as pasture improvement, weight gain, or any other advantages?
Yes, we don't do a lot of it, but we have integrated with sheep. A lot of times we won't run them at the same time, but we run them across the same pastures, because sheep and goats eat different than a cow does, especially in horses too, for that matter. It's a different way of grazing. You generally want to run the cows first because they don't have a top set of teeth. They only have bottom set, so they used to just pulling with their tongue to get the grass. If you let a sheep or goat go ahead of a cow, when the cow gets there, it's nothing he can eat. He just eats whatever's left, whatever tall, stemmy stuff's left. That's what he's got to eat. So a goat, sheep, horses, they have those teeth. They can bite closer to the ground. But if you run the cows through, they leave certain things that a goat and sheep really like. And you can control your worms in one species by using another species in there. And it's a lot of advantages to running multiple species at a time. But like I said, I don't know for sure if you want to run them all together at the same time. That would be the only thing I would, graze the cows first, come back right behind them with the sheep and goats, because they can eat closer to the ground and still get some good out of it. And those cows just need to be on the taller stuff so they can grab it with their tongue and pull it off. But that's a good question for sure.
When you mentioned earlier that you were talking about running steers and yearlings together, are you putting yearling bulls in that category if they're not being used?
I have done that, and I did it last year. Was one of the first times I did it, because we either raise the bulls up to a year old, and if we don't use them or sell them right then, you got to do something with them. And we run the steers and the bulls together. And I thought the bulls would be out there just riding the steers, and I was dreading a wreck. But really, the bulls were the least trouble of the whole group. the steers would get out and go do something else. The bulls stayed there and ate. So we didn't have any trouble running yearling bulls with their contemporary steer, the ones that we cut. We either cut at birth. So we cut some of them at birth, and then we had these bulls, and then we run them together for about 2 to 3 months and didn't have any adverse effects. The steers still gained. The bulls didn't ride them that much. I mean, it's more or less the steers riding each other more than the bulls were riding. So it can work together. If you run bulls and heifers together, you know what that's going to mean. We had a bull that he was supposed to be a steer. They banded him, but somebody couldn't count to 2, and they had one testicle high and one testicle low, and it took the bottom testicle off, and it was fertile. And we had a couple heifers that showed up bred at 14 months. They was already bred. So that's why when you cut 2 out, there's no more there. So I want to make sure I don't have any unexplained heifers calving, because you can ruin a good animal that way. She can calve too early, and even if she has it and can raise it, it's pulling her body that's not ready for it. And she's never going to be the cow she could have been if she just got bred at the right time. So
usually never get to their full size that they would have got to.
No, they'll never reach their genetic potential. And
right,
and the
sexual maturity.
consequence will
Soon as they reach maturity, they stop growing. So let's say you got Angus that are too big. If you breed them a little bit early, it'll knock their size down. They won't get to their full, like say they're going to normally get to 1,500 pounds. You breed them at 13 months to an Aberdeen bull, because they can still have it. When she hits that sexual maturity and she calves at 22 months of age, that's going to stunt her growth size-wise. It may not make her any thinner or fatter, but it will stunt her size, and you can get those cattle to be more moderate frame by just when you breed them. So when they hit sexual maturity, the same with a bull. If you breed a bull really early, let's say you use him hard as a yearling, he won't never be as tall as he could have been if he didn't have to breed a cow till he was 3 years old. So some of our bulls say, well, he's not as big as he should be. Well, we used him when he was young. He was doing something. He had to make some money back. So we use bulls, and we tell people, my recommendation is a bull can breed as many cows as he is months old. So a 12-month-old bull, you can run him with 12 heifers or 12 cows, and he could probably cover them in a 60-day breeding season without any problem. But you start getting 15 to 20, that's more cows. His sexual maturity is not to where he can cover that many. But we bred a lot of cows to yearling bulls. That's the way you get your genetic. You can skip a generation almost. If you use a yearling bull on some cows, you can get his genetics back out there faster because you used him sooner. We did that with opinionated. We bred him to our donor cows when he was 12 months old. He covered them. He bred them. We had calves out of them. That's why, and we collected him as well. So when he was 2 years old, he won the national champion. But the next year, he had a calf in the show ring that was reserve national champion, that Bonanza boxcar, because we collected him early to try to get his genetic potential out in the herd, and was able to get offspring that won even before he was 3 years old. So you can do a lot of things playing with genetics and playing with timing and age and things like that. You got to have a plan, because if you just haphazardly doing it, it could bite you. But if you got a plan and use it, like I said, we bred him to 5 cows the first year. So that wasn't too many for him. He was still gaining a little bit of weight. So that was when he was a year old. He didn't win the show till he was 2, but he was out there actually doing something before he was, some bulls just stand in the pen on the halter and they win the show, but they've never been out on cows or never been out of the pasture, not out of a pen. And we try to raise our bulls out in the pasture where they're always walking, basically to give them exercise. But if one can't keep up, he's got a structural problem. you can weed that out before you get him bred to any of your cows.
Hey, David, what do you think about, I know we can breed our heifers at 14 months, but what do you think about waiting until they're a little older to breed your heifers? I mean, I always had this idea with our cattle around here that every year's like 10 years of, being a person. So
Right.
when they're 14 months old, they're like a 15-year-old person.
That's
Their
correct.
mental maturity, especially.
Yeah, and you can do that, but our problem is if they don't breed at a certain time, they're out of our window of calving. So if you breed a cow at 14 to 15 months old, she'll calve when she turns 2, which she'll calve in usually the same month that she was born in. So she'll calve on her 2-year-old birthday. Most of ours are born in March. So if you breed her at 15 months, which is June, she'll calve the next year in March. She's in your same breeding window. If you're calving year round, it might be all right. But for us, if you wait one more month, she's going to calve in April. And let's say it takes her just a little bit longer to breed back than it normally would. And we pull the bulls, then she's already weaned herself out of our cow herd. She has to go to somebody else's herd that may have an April, May calving season. But like I said, we breed in a tight window because I don't know if it looks on this camera or not, but I'm tired. I've been calving out 100 head of heifers and 200, we had 250 cows, and getting up in the middle of the night, checking cows and checking these heifers that can't get up and have their own calf is wearing on me. And I don't want to calve year round. I couldn't do it year round. So
we calve in the spring, and then we calve again in the fall, but it's always heifers in the fall. So the heifers that are born in the spring, when they turn, when like 14 months old, when we're breeding the other cows, we usually wait till the fall because it's convenient for us. And
sure.
So they're 18 months old or so before we breed them. Well, what we found by doing that is their mental maturity, as far as taking care of calf, having a calf in this brush around here where you can't see them, it just works better for us.
And that's the way to do it. And a lot of people, we used to run 2 seasons up here too, but the fall season was good. Calves fine, but they couldn't raise them through the winter because it was so tough. So we stopped doing it. But that's one way of doing it. And you get that cow, like you said, a little bit older. You got to make sure you can pencil it. But sometimes that state of mind that she's going to take care of her calf is going to be worth it. But then she should calve every year at the same time. Say again?
Worth it for us because of all the work that you put into these heifers. You want to give them the best chance you can. And in our situation, well, I'm not going to do what you're doing. They're either going to have a calf or they're not. And I'm sorry, just the way it is. I can't do all that stuff, or we can't do all that stuff. Too many acres. You couldn't find them anyway in this, where we run cattle. You just couldn't ever find them. But their mental, the point I was trying to make is waiting 6 months is like them being 5 years older in human terms, which I think makes a lot of difference when you're talking about something as young as a 15-year-old or a 20-year-old.
And that 3 or 4 months difference is not going to hurt you that bad as waiting a whole nother year.
Yeah,
when you wait till they're 3 years old, they already start to deposit fat, which gets into that what we was talking about with body conditioning score earlier. They start having fat deposits or whatever. But by what you're doing, once she calves, she's born in the spring, you breed her to calve in the fall as a 2.5-year-old. But every year after that, she should calve on that date.
Yeah.
So every year they should stay in that herd. And long as they do that, then I think that's good because, like I said, you're getting state of mind, you're getting more chances of having a live calf at weaning because she knows how to take care of it. So, like I said, a plan is always good. If you got a plan and you know what you're doing, but you don't want them going born in the spring, calf is a 2.5-year-old in the fall, and then she weans herself out of that, and then she ends up in the spring again. Well, she's a slow breeder. As long as you keep up with that, you don't want her going back 6 months every time. Because that cow's got to make you money.
We breed our heifers in about a 42, 43, 44 day window. And what doesn't breed goes to grass-fed beef.
That's exactly the way we do it. We breed 30 days, 30, I think it's 32. They get 2 full cycles. So a cow's got a 21-day cycle. We try to give them 2 cycles. Well, that's 42. Yeah, like I said, about 42 days. And then we pull the bull. And we have a couple that shows up open, usually not too many. And they just go into the grass-fed beef. I mean, as soon as we preg check them, they're usually about 16, what would it be, 16, 17 months old. They already been on good grass. We turn them in with the steers, give them another 30 to 45 days. And from that point on, you know, they're ready to go to market.
It's hard
Some
to do
people
that
around here,
hard to do that when it's an embryo transplant calf and all that, but it happens.
oh, it happens every day up here.
Yeah, you spend all that money getting that calf from embryo transplant or something, and it winds up in your grass-fed beef. It
Absolutely.
Freezer selling it, you know.
We bought a bunch of embryos from Australia and put them in, and I mean, those were some of the worst calves that we'd had, not because of the breeder, but it was what they were out of, I think. But they just couldn't make it in our environment, so we ended up cutting every one of them. Like, man, that was an expensive steer. So, and they got to work. You can't make excuses for them. That's what I told a while ago. I mean, you cannot say, well, you know, I'm gonna give it one more year. Well, it's like saying, hey, give me $5 and I might pay you back this year, or maybe I won't pay you back at all. So you wouldn't do it with somebody. You can't do it with your cows either. You can't fall in love with them, and you can't make excuses for them.
Knowing that first calf heifers are more demanding, what are you doing during that year? Anything different? Are they in their own pen?
We try to graze them together, and we try to give them always the best grass. So if we run them in a separate herd, they're trying to go ahead of the cows, getting the best grass, having the most opportunity. We used to calve them out early, and that's still some advantage to that. You know, most people say they breed their heifers 2 weeks before their cows, basically so you can watch them closer, but then also it gives them longer period of time for them to breed back that second time. Just about anybody can breed a cow, a yearling heifer, and get her to have a calf. That's not a problem. It's getting that cow to breed back the second time is the hard time. So really we try to make them always have the best nutrition, keep them growing. And last year, we grazed them with the bull for 30 days. You know, we had them turned out with a bull for 40 days, pulled them off and turned them back with some weanling steers that we had on the best grass we had, trying to keep their nutrition growing to make them, because sometimes these full-blood Aberdeens don't get big enough to calve at 2. And that's, I mean, having a little trouble with that this year with some of them. That's, you know, they grew, they did all they could do, they looked good, but they just wasn't big enough to have a calf at 2 years old. So you can sure get into that problem.
Another reason,
but you always got to take better care of them than you do anything else.
Another reason that we do some breed ours a little later is that the heifer is, when she has a calf at 2, she's losing her teeth. If she hadn't already lost them, she's lost her teeth. So now she's 2 years old. She's still growing. She has a calf on her, and she doesn't have any teeth. So it's really tough. So you really got to be watching to take care of them. But I'm not recommending breeding them later like we do, but it just works so much better for us because we don't have to watch them. If we breed them at, say, 18 months, 17, 18 months, we don't have to watch them when they calve, which we just don't do that. They pretty well perform like their older cows do. Ours are out in the pasture. We expect them to raise their calf just like the other cows do.
Hey,
And
Larry.
when we watch ours, a lot of times what we watch them for is because it's the weather that we're calving in. We try to calve early in the wintertime, which sometimes doesn't make any sense. But that animal's old enough that we can process that steer at 18 months, instead of carrying them through 2 winters. And that's the reason why we calve early, not any other reason. And we try to do it as fast as we can. So I had 250 cows and we had 200 calves born in the month of March. I think it was 196, something like that. I don't want to exaggerate. I think it was 196 out of 250 of them calved in the first 30 days. So you can hit it hard for 30 days and then the other ones, they kind of on their own. The weather's good now. They should be able to have it on their own.
I know.
So,
So
what was the question?
somebody asked, I said they're losing their teeth, like their teeth in their mouth. At 2 years old, they lose right around there, they're gonna lose their teeth.
Their
It's
teeth,
gonna make them-
not their teeth.
Yeah, their
Teeth.
teeth.
Okay.
Yeah, their teeth.
It makes them.
I was trying to differentiate.
They're gonna have a lot of trouble getting enough nutrition. So,
Okay.
they're still growing. They got a calf on them now, and they don't have any teeth. It's a problem.
And their mouth's sore and they don't want to eat. So it is a problem. They'll
Okay.
lose their first 2 teeth in their mouth, their 2 center teeth as a 2-year-old, then they'll lose 2 teeth every year till they're 5. That's how you can mouth them and tell how old they are by how many teeth they got, how many mature teeth they have.
Every
And that was always the
university-
first question.
all the universities are going to tell you to breed your heifers at 14 months. And there's nothing wrong with it if you want to do it. It's just more intensive management on your heifer to get her through all of that till she gets all her teeth back and gets the calf raised. Her nutrition requirements are just going to be harder for her to get what she needs, especially if she's on her own out there getting.
Well, you also have to take into consideration too that we do have to give our heifers a little extra love supporting a calf through the winter too when they calve in the fall. So it's whichever way it's going to work out best for you in your environment. Like if you're like David and you have a mountain of snow every year, you may not want to carry them with the extra nutritional demands through the winter. But where we're at here in Central Texas, it's not as big of a deal for us. We still have, most of the time, we still have at least, a little bit of actively growing grass. We always make sure that we put back enough extra hay and, some sort of either alfalfa or something like that with a little bit of extra nutritional bang to give to our heifers as well, to make sure that we keep their nutrition up while they're supporting that calf.
The economics of it may not pay off for you. You want them to have a calf as soon as you can, around that 2 years old. But to us, it just works better for us. We have a little more in the cow, but if we've gone to all the trouble to raise her to get her bred, we're going to keep her for a long time, and we want her to last a long, long time. We bought like 20 heifers. I guess early last year. They were our genetics. We sold them the cows and the bulls, and we bought their heifers back. Well, they knew we were going to buy them, so they got them to us so we could breed them in the spring. Like April 1st, we could start breeding these heifers. But we didn't do that. We waited till they were 14 months old around April 1st. We waited till December 15th before we put a bull on. They were heifers we're going to keep. We got to pick them out of the herd. They were our genetics already, all the cows and the bulls. So it's something that we're going to hang on to. So, we just want to give them the best chance that we can.
And that's a really good point, because the most expense you have is developing a heifer or buying a heifer to put back in your program. So if you don't give her the most shot of success, it's like employee turnover. If you can keep an employee 2 or 3 years, your biggest expense is training that employee to do what you want him to do. Same with a cow. if you have to turn over every 2 weeks on a new employee and have to train them and teach them, you got a lot of expense on that. The more times you have to turn your heifers over because one fell out of your program, you either got to replace it or buy it to replace it. So you might be saving money in the long run, but you're just investing in the future, knowing that cow is going to do it. You know what she's going to do. You just give them a little extra time at the front end to make sure she lasts longer for the long term, which is not a bad plan.
Bob. Okay, so Bob asked, how many years were you planning to keep a cow before replacing?
As many as you can.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
we normally average somewhere between 9 and 10 years, and we do understand that the calves towards the end of her lifetime are not going to have the same growth as the calves in the middle of her lifetime. Because cows will produce their best calves between 4 and 7 years old. So we understand that those later years are not going to give us as heavy of calves. So we compensate for that by trying to keep heifers from her out of those middle years. Those last few calves, unless they're just far superior for whatever reason, whether there was a new bull or something out of the ordinary happened. Normally those are going into our beef program, but she's still a valuable calf or a valuable cow at that point. It may change over the years whether or not we start turning them over faster. Right now we still have capacity for more cows, so we keep extra every year in order to to keep growing. But
it's
yeah,
good to have a plan.
it is.
And
Some-
I
some
work for
cows-
a guy that. Go ahead.
Some cows just last longer than others too. Like we've flushed cows that are 17 years old, got viable embryos, and everything worked out great. They didn't live a lot longer than that, but we've kept them a long time before. And then some of them, you start seeing their decline. Look at their teeth. Main thing, way to tell what's going on, look at their teeth. Everybody's environment's going to be different too, and the wear on their teeth is going to be different every place you go, because everybody's management, environment, the years that cow's, how much did it rain, the years that she was there. I mean, there's a whole lot of different variables, but look at their teeth. When they start getting about 6 years old, be sure you need to be keeping them.
Yeah, and that's really important because if you have sandy soils, your teeth will wear out faster than you will on a loamy soil, because that sand, the grit, it wears their teeth out. It's got more grit in the grass, more grit in their environment, and it will wear their teeth out. And what you were saying about a drought year, I've had cows through a drought. I knew exactly how old the cows were, and they aged 2 years on their teeth in 1 year because of the stress. So they were the 3-year-old cow, but had a 5-year-old mouth. They already had their full set of teeth by the time they was 3 and a half, basically. But it was because it went through a drought part of the year, and it was really hard on them. They had to work hard for the grass, and it was tough, hot, and everything else, and it stressed them, and they will age faster. But the longer you can keep a cow in the herd and be productive, the more money she's going to make you, because all your expenses in developing a heifer to take her place or having to buy a bred heifer to take her place. So the longer you can keep them in your herd, she's going to make, it takes about 8 to 9 years before they're profitable, that you've already paid all their expenses, their loan cost, land cost, all that. You can pay it off by 6 or 7 years old if she's had a calf every year. If she skips it, it goes to 13 years if you just skip one calf. And I sold a cow here. She was 9 years old, and we had the production records on her, and she had 8 calves in 9 years, and we'd flushed her in 2 different years during that time. So a cow that can do that, and she calved, her calving interval was 364 days on 8 years, on 8 calves. So I thought that was pretty dang good. That's one of the best ones I'd ever had. And she was always one of the best producing cows, weaned the top calf in every calf crop. And then also I had one cow, she was one of our donors, but we we skipped a year because we flushed her like 5 times during that year to try to get more embryos out of her because she was, I think, 11 years old at the time. So we really flushed her hard, and then we bred her back in the regular season with all the other cows. When she was 12 years old, she had the highest weaning weight calf of any of the cows in the herd as a 12-year-old. So some cows that are good will just do it. You know, she's probably is not as good as she once was, but she's as good once as she ever was. So that was one of our top producing cows, and we got offspring and stuff out of her now. The bulls are better out of that cow. The heifers are better out of that cow. So your good ones are always going to be your best ones. Have your best calves, wean the best, you know. So the more you can get that genetics in your herd, the better your whole herd will be.
There's another thing to think about too, and we did this. Now, there was some emotion involved in this because she was my first show heifer, but more than that, she stopped producing about the time she hit 10. So really, we should have gotten rid of her. She was a standing gratuitous, and she had a vaginal and cervical prolapse that had to be fixed with her last calf. So we never rebred her because of that, because she'll just do it again every year. But we kept her not only because of the emotions involved, but also because she was a particularly good cow at managing her herd mates, because you always have that lead cow. And she was also a particularly good mother. So what we used her as is we put her with our heifers every year. And until the heifers were ready to go into the normal herd group, she stayed with heifers, raised heifers through their first calf. So a cow cannot, and you have to be very specific about the traits that you want with that, but a cow can also be profitable in other ways than just providing you a calf. You know, our cost of keeping her here every year, of her grazing and her medical costs and everything, she'd already paid herself off by that time. So, you know, the benefits we got from her to us more than paid for her management costs at that point.
What Lynn's trying to say is, when we say raising heifers, we put her with 20 or 30 heifers in one pasture, and the environmental influence from that old cow being in there with them, those heifers learn a lot of things about how to be in a herd, what to eat, what not to eat. They learn. Believe it or not, cows can learn all this stuff.
Well,
Absolutely.
We found too, like Dad was saying, you know, at 14 months old, they're like a 15-year-old girl. And I mean, can you imagine the havoc if you stuck 20 15-year-old girls all together as like raised cells? You know, that would be just, and we were having those issues where they were just, they weren't growing well, they weren't performing to their best ability with their first calves. And after we stuck that steady, old, you know, well-experienced cow in with them, even though she wasn't having a calf every year, she was valuable to us. So if you have one that's just has that ability, you know, don't discount her too, especially if you're keeping a bunch of heifers, she ended up, you know, really helping us out year after year until we had to put her down. But as a consequence, we've also done the same thing. You know, the experienced cows, we only keep the ones now that have calves, but we always put an experienced cow in with our heifer groups in order to help them along as well. So,
and one other thing you could do, you know, have a plan for your cow herd. Maybe you don't want to keep the cow her entire life and wait till she either has to take her to the sale barn to get cull cow prices. I worked for a guy, and he was an accountant. He was a CFO of a Fortune 500 company, but he had cows too. But that's what he wanted to do. He figured out what he wanted to do, and we bought a bunch of heifers as yearlings, bred them. They'd have 5 calves, and sell them as a 6-year-old bred. You can get, that cow still got some value to it. So we was able to sell the cows because of the way, I like to think, the way I was managing this herd. We bought them at $1,000, and then they raised 5 calves, sold them as a bred 6-year-old, and got $2,500 a piece for those cows. So necessarily keeping her till she has that calf as she calves as an 11-year-old may not be that profitable. Well, you might should have got rid of her as an 8 or 9 or 7 or 8-year-old that still had some life in her. You could sell her to your neighbor, or, sell her to somebody else, and they could still benefit from that cow having 2 or 3 more calves, but you actually profited by not having to dig a hole and bury her on your place. So that's always a thing to do. And we sold a lot of our cows this year because they were 6, 7, 8-year-old cows. We've already got some of their offspring out of them. They were bred to really good bulls. So we sold those older cows to other people that was trying to get that genetics into their herd. So, we got a premium what that actual cow was worth, because she was a bred, 7 or 8-year-old cow with a history of having good calves. So they can get 1 or 2 calves out of that cow for that price and still add something to their program. So, like I said, sometimes a plan, even though you sell them at 6 or 7, that's your plan. You can still get some value out of those cows. They're not killer cows. They're actually a productive cow. She's going to have 2 to 3 more calves. So you sell them under that pretense, and you can, you might not get top dollar as you would for a bred heifer or something like that. But if you can get $2,000, $2,500 for a 7-year-old cow, sometimes it's better to move that cow along and bring the new offspring up. So there's 2 sides of the coin. Just don't get trapped into going one way just because you want to have a 13-year-old cow having her 12th calf. That's really good to say, but you might have should have sold her when she was 8.
Some of that you wonder, him being a CFO, if part of that is because you depreciate him over 5 years, that their value, in a sense, tax wise, was gone. So it made sense potentially then too.
Absolutely. And he was a smart guy. He was a CFO of Terminex before they sold it to Service Master. So I guarantee you, every time I do something, he'd say, we lost money on that. Like, are you kidding me? I sold a heifer, commercial calf for $2,500 at weaning for a show heifer. He said, you know what? I figured that up. We lost money on that deal. And I was like, we lost money on that deal. There's no way I'm going to be able to make you money. But he had it figured out because of depreciation and the land cost and this and that. I mean, if you're smart enough to figure all that, you shouldn't be raising cows, because you're gonna lose some money. Some of it's just for the way of life.
You need it for the write-off at that point, right?
Exactly. You're doing it for the way of living. That's what we say. We try to make money at our cows, but it's also the cost of living. I mean, we like living this way. We like raising our kids this way. We like living in this environment, working like we do. So we're not going to be a Fortune 500 company, as long as we can be profitable and, pay the bills and make a little money and keep everybody happy. And that's kind of the reason why we're doing it. We're not doing it we're doing it because we like that way of living, but you got to make a profit at it too.
So
You don't
Bob,
mind
go ahead.
rewinding just a little bit, right? I should say a lot of it because it was towards the beginning, but you were talking about when you're doing the rotational and doing very intense grazing and potentially limiting it to the 2 hours a day, but yet they're on feed or hay the rest of the time. Are you doing full feed or rational?
It would just be like free choice hay.
Okay.
And a lot of times that just keeps their gut moving and keep enough roughage in them. If you just stick one bale of hay out there, we do that sometimes just to have it at the edge of the field, especially if you own some really good grass. And the cow will limit herself. She can tell, hey, my stomach's upset because I eat all this rich grass. She'll go to that hay bale and get, a couple mouthfuls of that, just trying to, manage her own body if you give her the
Sure.
choice.
Balancing the fiber
it-
and such.
Yep, exactly. She's got too much protein, too much of this. She needs some fiber in there to slow it down a little bit. And they know how to do it. If you can let them do it, they would do it on their own. But like I said, you always want them to grow fast and do this, but sometimes it's better just to have an old sorry bale of hay in the field, and it may last you all the whole season, but when they need it, they'll go get it.
So Bob also asked, are old cows good for hamburger? It's been our experience that yes, but there's a caveat to that. Most of the time they've developed a very strong flavor because of the keratin in the has turned all their fat orange, and it really turns off some customers. So we found that we have to leave older cows on our feeding program to develop the flavor profile back, and they have to stay on there longer than what our steers or feeder heifers would have to. So you're just gonna have to, for your program, you're gonna have to put pencil to that and see whether or not it's gonna be more valuable for you to actually leave them longer to get that flavor profile and then process them versus, just recouping extra costs by either selling them as a bred cow if they're still young enough, or taking them to the sale barn and getting slaughter cost. So it's just whatever's gonna work.
So my situation is that I have a couple of cows that I fell in love with. They were the first ones I started my herd with, and they've gotten basically too old to breed. They're at that point. I had 3 of them. I brought one to market, okay, and it didn't pay for my gas to bring it to market.
Yeah.
I could have probably fed it out more, on a grain basis or feed program that would have put some weight on it more, and I think that I could have got some hamburger out of it, but I wasn't real sure, like you say, with flavor and such. So with that being said, about how much time do you feed longer?
So we leave them on for at least an extra, we almost double the time with them, because most of
90 days or
about
so.
90 days. We leave them an extra 45.
We do grass-fed beef here. That's our business, but we still have customers that want grain-fed cows from all the years before of doing grain-fed, but some of those customers are still around. So we've done it a lot of times with 10, 11, 12-year-old cow not having calves, especially the full bloods. We'll bring them up here. That's actually the ones we eat. That if you leave them on feed for 90 to 100, 120 days on our feed ration anyway, that's some of the best beef you're ever gonna have. But you have to give it time. You can't rush it.
Yeah, because they're gonna have to start depositing that white fat and transitioning it over and getting rid of the extra keratin and stuff. So it takes time. It's not that their beef quality is going to be extra tough or anything like that. If you have a good quality cow, it's just gonna take time to get that kind of gamey flavor out of their beef.
So I've started that, and I've noticed that her body condition, well, one in particular, her body condition has really come up type situation. She's been in there probably about 45 days now.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you do that, and I said hamburger because I think, well, are all the cuts going to be worth going through, or should I just grind her up?
You need to get your butcher to tell you that when it's hanging. They don't hang it for however long they hang it, but they can check to see what kind of marbling you have.
Like he does my regular steers then, right?
Yeah. Okay. When they cut, like if USDA is grading it, which I don't know if they're going to do that, but they can cut into the rib right there and see how much marbling that animal has. And if the marbling is good, you can get all the steaks and everything that you want out of it.
Okay, thank you.
What else you got?
Any of them? Well, that's about what I had. I was just seeing if anybody had any questions. I kind of went fast through it, but like I said, just trying to get a basis so you, when somebody starts talking those numbers or those digits, you know what they're talking about, not trying to talk around you or talk over you. Once you learn those, average daily gain, those things, a lot of people already know that, but you have a lot of other things too. And especially a feed salesman, they'll try to say, it's got 19% protein. Okay, well, what's the fat content? Well, I don't know. A lot of times the fat content in feed is what's really good. So, I mean, the more educated you can get to know what terms and what to ask for, it can save you a lot of time and headache too.
That's for sure. Anybody have any questions?
Well, that usually tells you either really good or really bad. You really don't know which one it is. If there's no questions, it's either everybody
a lot of my questions. I surely appreciate it because this has been very educational for me, and in the fact that I'm trying to grow what I have, starting out with a half a dozen and now trying to, double or quadruple what I had. Well, now I'm going to have to do much more management on my per acre. And so I really appreciate this, fellas.
It was great. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot tonight. Always do.
Well,
I'm going. Not gotta go. It's my bedtime. See y'all next time. Bye.
David, I actually thought of something else, and actually, Larry, I would appreciate your input as well. There was mention earlier about the value of the ultrasound as opposed to other data. So how much weight would you consider valuable in trait DNA testing as opposed to the ultrasound?
I'll tell you what I think about there's nothing wrong with getting the DNA, the genomic testing for DNA, if that's what you're talking about. But
yes,
you need in my opinion anyway, you need the ultrasound too. See if they match. Because if you don't have the real data, what the DNA is going to tell you is it has a genetic potential for certain things. I'm not sure how accurate all that is. We've done all that stuff and we had a lot of trouble trying to make it match to the real data. So we quit doing it after 4 or 5 years of spending thousands of dollars. We quit doing it because we thought we were taking our cow herd the wrong direction. So we just stick with the real data, and that always works. That's my opinion on that. David probably has a lot of opinion on that too.
Well, and I do. I tell the story all the time about my brother and I have the same genetics. We have the same parents, same, basically DNA. He was 6'1", 6'2", and about 300 pounds, and I'm blonde-headed, green-eyed, and I'm brown-haired, a lot shorter than that. So we have the same genetics, but some of those traits get expressed in different animals or different people. And some adapt better to your environment. So just because they have the potential, like Larry said, you got to match it to make sure it can match it and do that in your environment. Because, if it has the potential of being the greatest one in the world, but it can't stand the heat or it doesn't like insects or flies, it's not going to do you a lot of good if you live in the South, because you have plenty of heat and plenty of insects biting on it. Same within the northern thing. If it can't handle the winters and can't, function in, sometimes 20 and 30 below zero, then the best genetics in the world is not going to do me any good unless it can handle the environment that it's in. Or I have to sell this place and buy another one.
That's what that helps.
Yeah, very fair statements. Thank you.
Well, That's all I know. I'm tired of talking. I know y'all tired of listening, so.
Anybody
guys,
have any other?
I just want to say I appreciate it. I've learned a lot tonight. You know, you spent over 10 years in this, and I thought, wow, I was doing a couple things wrong and learning things the right way. So I do appreciate the knowledge that you spread past. As always, been great meetings. Thank you, guys.
There's
Yeah.
Thanks, Rodney.
one thing I want to say about grass-fed beef. The taller, I mean, you don't want grass that's matured out, but you want your cows eating off the top part of that grass. And then you want to move them off before they get down to the, 4 or 5 inches tall. It keeps them from getting the yellow fat. It makes them a lot cleaner kind of beef that people are used to with the white fat.
And what was the height on that again?
Well, I guess David probably knows more about it than me, though. Like with our grass, we don't want them eating the last 4 or 5 inches of the grass. I'll move them to something else if I can. If I can't, I'm gonna have to bring them in here and for a flavor profile. Like right now, it's all ryegrass here, so it really doesn't matter. They're not gonna keep up with it for a couple of months right now, but getting into the summer, we're going to bring our steers back in here for a certain amount of time before we can process because of the flavor profile. They get that yellow fat from the bottom part of the grass, right off the grain.
And we try to do it in thirds. The top 1/3 is the best nutritionist, best grass you can get. The middle third is kind of the meat and potatoes. It's got some good in it, but the bottom third is where all the, the structure of that plant is, which is not really good for the animal growing. So with our steers,
It's also where the plant does a lot of their, like storage of excess things. It's not actively growing right there. So where your grass is actively growing, that's where you're going to get your best flavor beef. That's where the cow's going to get the most bang for her buck as far as, what she harvests off the actual grass stalk is that top portion.
and that's what we normally do. We in a rotation that we do, we have the steers are always going first. They go to the first pasture. One year we put out 60 or 70 steers on 600 acres. And they just stayed there for 30 days. They didn't near about eat all the grass that was there, but all they did was pick the tops. And then we moved them to another section. And then we brought the cow calves behind it to eat the meat and potatoes part. They didn't need as much protein and nutrients as those steers did to gain. They just need to maintain and lactate. So that's the way we do it. We graze our steers first, put them on a piece of property for a short period of time, then move them to the next one. And the faster you move them, the better they grow. They always at a new place. They growing faster. And that keeps that fat white. And then you can graze your cows behind it. And then if you got some, dry cows that are not doing anything at that period of time, you can run them behind the cow herd because they don't need anything. They just need to maintain. So that's the best thing to keep your fat good. And the flavor profile is always moving them to fresh ground and always having that flavor profile. As soon as you let them eat mature grass, your profile is going down, your fat's getting yellow.
Anything else?
All right. Well, David, thank you so much for this, doing the presentation tonight, and we appreciate what you did and your expertise and everything. It's been great.
Well, matter to see what they want for next time. Maybe they want something totally different.
Well, sundown's done going down over here. Been really good.
Thank you for your patience. I seen it kept getting darker and darker.
I'm sitting in the truck in the pasture.
I figured I knew he was in the truck. So, well, good deal. Well, that's
Good
all
night,
I got.
everybody.
I appreciate y'all listening.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
for
Dana, you
Thank you.
anything all night? Dana, oh, she left. Dana Balzer.
Good. Thanks for informing us. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.